Mr. Thakur, a very good afternoon to you. Welcome to NDTV Profit. Let's get right to it with Trinity Pictures, which is an Eros arm slated to kick off production in FY17. This is as good a time as any to just take a moment and explain to our viewers the mandate of Trinity Pictures.
Good afternoon, Manvi. Thank you for having us over on the show. Basically, Trinity Pictures was started in February 2015 as an umbrella studio arm of Eros, which is India's biggest studio. And we've just heard great news that some of our films from last year, Bajirao Mastani and Tanu Vs Manu, have kind of swept the national awards. And the agenda for Trinity was for Eros to get into active production itself, because currently the studio model has been about co-productions and acquisitions. And with Trinity, this is our first foray into producing and creating our content ourselves.
Okay, how would you describe the content strategy that Trinity is pursuing? I mean, what differentiates your content strategy from rivals out there?
Oh, quite a few things. First and foremost, at Trinity, one of the things that we've chosen to embark upon is that we will only greenlight scripts and stories that have the potential for franchise. And that means that we are looking at characters and the universe of characters more than the plots when the ideas are being pitched to us. We do have sequels in this country, but I think we have had very few films that have been planned as a franchise. And Trinity will solely focus only on franchise films. That's one. Coming from the franchise film brief is also the differentiation in terms of genres. So today, typically, a majority of Bollywood films are either comedies, love stories, social dramas, or the action films that we see. With Trinity, we are hoping to break new ground in terms of genres. We are planning kids films, we're looking at live action, animal features, we're looking at animation, we're looking at gods and kings, superheroes, a whole gamut of genres that have not been regularly explored here, which you will see in our first slate as well. And the third and interesting thing about the Trinity setup has been that a majority of our films that we've announced have been developed by an in-house writer's room, which is a very, very common template in the US. But in India, I don't think any of the studios have invested in a full-time room of writers.
Okay. It's interesting that you mentioned that, underline the franchise approach. You're looking at content that has potential for a franchise. Sure, anecdotally, as people who watch movies, we understand that franchises have promise, perhaps even sustainability. What else do you associate with franchise that is so important for the Indian market? We've seen franchises here. You're saying they just haven't been planned sequentially in advance?
Yes, so I think a lot of our sequels have been an outcome of the film being a success, and then you plan a sequel to it. When you're writing a franchise, the writing process is very, very different. For instance, we have spent substantial time just outlining the universe of the character and writing out the character story in detail. And some of those story outlines will probably go over 3 films. And then we decide, okay, now let's write the first script. So I think that's a big difference in terms of the template. And I think the franchise studio model is here to stay, and I'm sure lots more will happen because there are intrinsic business benefits to franchises as well. When you're planning a franchise, and if you can plan the 3 films ahead, there's a certain, residual awareness of the film that you get on the first day that you promote the sequel. Absolutely. And that is pretty much a given. If in the last 8 or 9 years, if you look at Hollywood from 2008 onwards, I've been tracking it, almost every year, the top 8 of the 10 films have been franchise films, which have been planned as franchises.
Okay, the other opportunity that franchise films throws up is this whole digital merchandise, all of the surrounding pieces of the puzzle. So, have you paid a fair bit of attention to that piece as well?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for asking that, because we are setting up these characters and universes as franchises, not as franchise films. Films is a big part of that character, but that's just one of the many things that we're looking at. In fact, for one of our stories, we're going to go and create the comic book first before we do the film. For another franchise idea of ours, we already have a query for an animation series for television. We're looking at gaming across all of the first 5 films that we talked about. And of course, there's merchandising. And in the new digital world, I'm sure there'll be many more options like virtual reality and so on.
So, you know, this is, in a sense, at least when you talk about the holistic approach, this is new territory, which leads me to the question whether there are never seen before kind of budgets that you have at your disposal as well. Are there any numbers that you can share with us as far as, you know, budgets for this approach? I know you're slated to start production in FY17.
Yeah, so I think the budget is a big part of it. Unfortunately, the current Indian box office has limitations to how much we can invest. But just to give you an example of one of the first films we have greenlit, which is a kids film, which is to be directed by Amol Gupte. Traditionally, kids films in India have been done in a very small budget. They don't have enough marketing spends and so on. And I can tell you that without doubt, this will be the most expensive kids film, where we have a fair amount of special effects and action in a non-star driven film. And that's because I believe the power of the franchise outweighs the absence of a big star. And you will see more of that. In fact, one of the ways in which we have looked at enhancing the budgets is to look at our films targeting multiple groups. And the biggest in that, on that aspect has been our endeavor to put together a project which is truly an organically developed story where our character needs to travel from India to China. And 2 of those films have been greenlit by the Chinese companies who are our partners. And in that, actually, we're looking at scaling up the budgets because we're not worried about just the Indian box office.
Oh, is that the only China element to your strategy, or are there more like that?
So there are more. So in fact, almost all our films that we've announced in the first slate have a dual target audience. The kids film will hopefully get the families, but our primary target is kids, who have not seen an original Indian film in a long time. Hollywood keeps sending us releases every year, at least 3 or 4, which are for targeting them. One of our buddy cop films, which is being directed by Telugu director Krish, is actually going to be simultaneously shot in Hindi and Tamil, not dubbed, but shot in both the languages. And 2 of our films are Indo-China. And we are very excited about China as a market. I don't know if you've read any of the reports on the latest Chinese blockbuster. It's called Mermaid. It's been done by the same guy who directed Kung Fu Hustle years back, Stephen Chow. In its 3rd week, and it's still running, it had crossed about 3,500 crores.
Well, it'll be certainly very interesting to see how this plays out. I know it's sort of early days, and you've given us a sample of the slate under development, but year 1, year 2 kind of goals. Is there anything very definite that you can share with us that you're hoping to put out there? Any timelines that you can put out there at this stage?
Yes, 3 timelines. In terms of production of the 5 films you announced, at least 3 of those films will be in production in this fiscal, which is before March 17. The other 2, we are waiting for the actors dates to fall in place. We are definitely looking at releases in calendar year 2017. The same 3 films should release before Christmas 17. One of them much earlier, hopefully this December or early January next year. And the 3rd thing I can tell you is that one of our pet peeves at Trinity is to create a 1,000 crore franchise. And what I mean by that is not just the box office of that film, but in terms of the overall potential of the franchise. And we want to be the first to scale that. But that's an ambition and a goal.
And it'll be interesting to track its realization. One final, slightly flippant question, so bear with me as I ask it. Given the strategy that you've just outlined, does that automatically exclude the big stars, crowd the screen with famous faces kind of approach?
I wouldn't say that. I think 2 of our films, especially the Indo-China film that Kabir Khan is going to be directing, that needs a big Indian star, because we're targeting two big markets. Between the two markets, it's like almost half of the world's population that we're targeting, and we're looking at a big Indian star. But yes, to answer your question, in all its seriousness, one of the advantages of developing these franchises and the characters is that our dependence on the big stars is lesser than the regular scripts. Today, it's very difficult to mount a good love story without a big face in it, or a comedy which can kind of travel. But I believe that the kids film, or the film that we're doing live action with elephants, I think the star value of the film will come from the characters and the scale at which we will mount them. Because I believe that for young India to go and spend $250 in a theater, they need to have an experience. So either it's a big star, or it's a big visual, or it's a very, very new premise. I'm hoping that we'll tick off the last two in every film of ours. Okay. And of course, in some of them, we'll have the big star as well. I hope I've answered your question.
Fair enough. Ajit Thakur, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us, and we look forward to many more such conversations as the Trinity Pictures presence expands here in India. Good talking to you today, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.